Welcome to Tea and Talk. I'm your host, Olivia Boughton. Today, I'm joined by Rutland City Attorney, Megan LaChance. Megan, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So before we start talking, we'll start with tea. So the set that we're using today is a Japanese set, and likely from somewhere in the 1930s to 1960s. And the reason I say that, because I bought this at a thrift store, but I did a little research, and this kind of hand painting design was very common, especially for export after the war. Okay. And on the bottom it says Japan, so we know with English writing it was likely designed for export. But what's really neat about this set, I think, is if you look in the bottom of the cup, you can see there's a little face in there.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can feel free to take
your own,
take your own cup. But then when you hold it up to the light, you actually see more detail, right? So there's a little geisha face in the bottom. And this technique is called lithophane, which was a common technique in Europe in the 1800s and something that in Japanese pottery, especially for export, they started to do. And you get this effect by different layers of the porcelain. So it's quite a process to make a lithophane, but it's a really neat little detail that when I first bought this, I had no idea and kind of accidentally realized what it was. So it's a charming little accent to this set. So the painting on it is, mountain terrain and some lovely, kind of a bamboo bridge. It's very, very pretty. So I decided I was going to serve us some blackberry tea. So kind of in this summery mood and sort of a, gentle mood. It's a black tea, but it has blackberry leaves and blackberry flavoring in it. So I'm going to pour you and myself a little bit of this delicious tea. And then there's some creamer and some sugar if you care for one or both or neither. Just let me know.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any sugar for you?
I think I'm going to try it without to start.
Okay. I'm going to take a little sugar cube for myself here. Put a dollop of this creamer in. Oop, just a teeny bit. And you let me know if you want some sugar.
I'll let you know. I think I'm okay for now. But.
Okay. So, cheers. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers.
Take a little sip. Can smell that blackberry before you even get to your mouth. Very nice. So while we sip our tea and enjoy our tea, let's talk. So Megan, tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what that was like.
Yes, so I'm originally from Ohio, Canton area, grew up in the suburbs. Everybody always says, oh, you're from the area that has Football Hall of Fame, and I'm like, yes, and do I like football? Not so much, but that's all right.
But that's Canton's claim to fame,
yeah,
right?
that is the big claim to fame. So so everybody kind of knows where that is if they're into sports. But so that's the area where I grew up, very different to Vermont.
For sure.
A lot more urban and that sort of feel. Went through college and everything, eventually went on to law school here in Vermont, at Vermont Law School,
Okay.
which is where I met my husband, who's a Vermonter, and so of course we stayed in Vermont, and it's just a beautiful, lovely place to be.
Yeah, I was going to say, so from Ohio to Vermont, what was that road like? But you went to school here, but what drew you to apply to school here?
So it's funny. So I did my undergrad at the College of Worcester in Ohio, and I was an English major. Well, I got to the end of got into my senior year and then realized that I was never going to be able to survive as a writer. And I'm like, all right, well, what do I do with an English degree? So I was looking into law, and at the time I was very interested in environmental law. And when I was looking, Vermont Law School was one of the top-ranked schools nationally for that.
Okay.
And I had some relatives who had lived here. They were, elderly and probably not going to be living here much longer. My great aunt's since moved down with her daughter down in Massachusetts, but for a while they were up here too. So I'd been to Vermont before, but it had been many, many years. But I'm like, why not? I enjoy like skiing. I like mountains. It's a lovely place.
Yes.
Like, let's just go and check it out. So that's kind of how I ended up here, going to law school. So it was a nice change.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you started out as an English major.
Yes.
So how did you kind of come to that? And then you said you didn't think you could, write for a living necessarily, but
Yes.
why then law? So
family pressure.
okay, that's a very honest
I think
answer.
the short answer to it. No, it had been mentioned to me several times, like, you should do this. I think you would be good at this. And I'm just like, well, I can always start, and if I don't like it or it doesn't work out, I can always do something different. But it was interesting when I was looking, I was kind of debating between like, okay, do I go to law school or do I get a Master of Fine Arts and just teach?
Yeah.
So I was going back and forth between the two and ended up going the law route, and I'm happy with that. So
That's good. That's good. Are there lawyers in your family? That there
No,
was
I'm
pressure?
actually the first one. So,
Wow.
So it's definitely a bit of a change.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Because I was thinking when you said, kind of family pressure, that maybe there was
No, it was
a
more-
legacy.
No, it was
keep up.
more the families going like, why on earth are you majoring in English? You need to have something with a career. So, like, get a real job type thing, which is sort of funny because you can do a lot of things with an English degree.
Of course.
But that was kind of where that came from.
That's
and
funny.
everybody just kept saying, well, you would make a really good lawyer. And at the
So
time,
were you very good at arguing your case as a child? Maybe that was a
I don't know. I honestly don't know why people necessarily thought that, because I was the kid that grew up being terrified of public speaking. Absolutely hated it. So it's actually kind of funny that I'm sitting here having this conversation now.
Right.
But no, I was always that kid that didn't want to do it. Ended up joining speech and debate team in high school's extracurriculars. I was taking a public speaking course because I knew at some point in my adult life I was probably going to have to like give a presentation or something like.
something like that. We all have to at some point.
Need to be more comfortable with it. So, and
Yep.
it was extra credit if you join the speech and debate team. And I'm like, well, it can't feel worse than it already does, and it's extra credit, and I might need it to pass the class.
There you go.
That's how I did that, and kind of went from there. So I don't know whether or not I was actually any good at it, but everybody seemed to think that I was doing okay, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it was just the thing you needed to develop some confidence, right? Sometimes those things, it's not really about whether we're good at it, but experiencing it in and of itself can give us more confidence so that we get out of our heads and then we become better at that activity just because we're less scared
Yeah,
to
exactly.
be standing in
It's
front of people.
sort of the overcoming anxiety is just sort of forcing yourself into the situations that sometimes and just going through it.
Yeah.
And I stayed with that for a while, even when I was going through law school. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be one of those attorneys that's in the courtroom all the time. I enjoy like the contract negotiations behind the scenes. Of course, I laugh at that now. My first job out of law school after I passed the bar was as a deputy state's attorney here in Rutland. So I was in the courtroom just about every day.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it kind of backfired in that sense. I'm like, well, I guess
This
I'm
is not what I want to do,
is-
and then here you
and
are
then
doing
here I
it.
am doing it. So, so no, it's been a good experience. I'm really glad it happened the way it did. It was just not what I initially had envisioned doing,
Yeah.
I guess. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So environmental law was kind of your focus initially, or where you wanted your
Yes.
focus to be, and that shifted when and how.
Mostly with needing to find a job after law
There you
school
go.
is usually how that works. So no, I actually I did the full Master of Environmental Law and Study.
Wow.
Environmental Law and Policy. If I can say words today. So I did that while I was at Vermont Law School as well, and went through all of that. And it's really interesting because I've barely used that degree at all, and it isn't actually until I got into municipal work where that really started kind of being valuable. So, which is
Right.
kind of interesting.
Right.
But it involves, land use and different things with that in terms of working with the municipality, which is probably getting a little nerdy and a little too
That's
into
okay.
legal jargon here,
That's
but
okay.
it's good. So
So your first job out of law school was with the Rutland State's Attorney's Office. And then what followed after that? What's the road to city attorney?
So I was pretty upfront with them actually when I started there. Criminal law was never my passion, never what I wanted to do long term.
Right.
Did it for a couple years, and I was just kind of getting overwhelmed and burned out by it. And at the time, you know, I had just gotten married, and my husband and I were thinking of buying a house. And so we bought a house and ended up moving, so the timing kind of worked perfectly. And so I stopped my job there. I'm like, well, I'll take a few months off, and I'll set up the house and get everything together, and then, you know, jump back in with a private firm or something. And then COVID came.
Right, yeah.
As it were. And so everyone I had been talking to and, you know, trying to get interviews with for hiring for jobs, I got a lot of calls back saying, I'm sorry, but we can't hire anybody else right now. The world's gone crazy. We're not, you know, we just don't have anything for you.
Yeah. A lot of uncertainty at that time.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty. So it was kind of interesting being stuck at home during that time. And, you know, after a while, I'm like, okay, I need to find something to do, to get out and do something else. And so I live in Shrewsbury, and at the time our town clerk was retiring and was looking for someone to fill the position. And I'm like, you know what, always kind of been interested in sort of municipal side of things and all this. And town clerks do a lot with, you know, land records and maintenance of those records, which sort of involved my love of,
your expertise.
Right, a little bit with that, with the, you know, sort of the land, the actual records themselves, but also sort of the maintenance of that as historical documents. I actually spent 2 summers volunteering at a local history museum in Michigan, of all places, and worked doing volunteer archival work for them and with the paper records. So it was really, and it was my favorite job. I say job, I didn't get paid a dime for it, of course, the way internships go, but no, it was a wonderful experience, one of my favorite things I've ever done. And so I'm like, well, being town clerk would be kind of mixing those two worlds a bit in a really fantastic way. So I was really excited about it. And it was great. I had a lot of fun doing that. Did that from 2021 until about September or so of 2023, when after I started my job with the city here in Rutland, I ended up giving it up because doing both at once is not really feasible from a time perspective.
I would not think so.
So that's kind of how that ended up. But no, it was great, and that's sort of the circle back to Rutland that I made there with that.
Isn't that funny?
It's kind of funny how that worked, but it was good.
Yeah. So what's, I mean, this is a very, very broad question, and you can be as specific or as broad as you like, and I'm putting you on the spot, but what's your favorite thing about law or being an attorney?
Oh my. Yeah, it's always really hard to pick just one thing with that. I think my favorite thing about it and being in the legal field is actually just the ability to help people solve their problems and go through it. There's something like about sort of the nature of law, and there's certain rules and things, but of course there's a lot of gray area in there too, and helping people navigate that with whatever situation they're dealing with is just something that I really enjoy doing. It's very people-oriented in some ways.
Yes.
I don't think all attorneys would agree with me on that. They're just like, we don't really want to deal with this. But no, I feel that's kind of my favorite part, is just helping people sort of navigate through sort of the laws that are there, and kind of try to find solutions to weird, interesting things that come up, and people are like, am I even doing this right? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's go find out and see how that works. So,
it's kind of like being a guide along a path, and also an investigator, right? To figure out, you know, what's the best path through here. And I mean, the way that I know you, you seem like a very, very generous and people-oriented person. So it's not surprising to me that the aspect that you most like is dealing with people and interfacing with people and trying to help them to solve an issue and get through whatever problem is in front of them.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's a nice perspective to have, you know. And
yeah, I mean, there's, you know, everybody has their favorite thing, and I think mine's one of the odd ones, because some people are like, oh, I just like really like working with contracts or really like writing and stuff. And
sure.
I mean, all that can be good and interesting in its own way, but people's always sort of the focus, being people-centered, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you do a lot of volunteer work, you mentioned your unpaid internship, which, you know,
Yes.
I mean, kind of amounts to volunteerism there.
Yeah, more or less on the days I'm feeling like really giving myself a boost, I call myself a volunteer archivist for that museum on my resume occasionally.
There you go.
And I'm like, I don't know how true it is. It's more or less what I was doing, but I was definitely the unpaid intern.
Yeah. So, but what, I mean, I know you're involved with a few different things.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me about what motivates you to give back and how you do that in the community?
Yeah, so I do a fair amount of work actually with the Rutland Dismiss House. Up until recently I was on the council, still do a lot of work in planning the dinner auction for them annually every year, and try to get in the houses and cook with the residents and stuff. Got asked to volunteer for that like right at the start of the pandemic, basically,
Right.
Which was kind of interesting. They weren't necessarily a group I went and sought out, but I did know about them because while I was working in the state's attorney's office here in Rutland, I was also the liaison with the Rutland County Treatment Court. And a lot of the folks going through that would occasionally be staying in residence at Dismiss House.
Sure.
So I kind of got to know about the program through that and just found it absolutely fascinating, and how fabulous it is that you have this program that wants to help reintegrate people into the community and really sort of help and lift people to be better.
It's a really important resource. It really is. And I think, you know, can fly under the radar for many people in the community, but the work they're doing is really important.
Yeah, and it's so I just found that there was a lot of value in that program, and having seen people go through the program who were in the treatment court and seeing how much better they did than folks who maybe weren't getting that extra support and sort of that family supportive environment. It was kind of incredible. I'm like, you know, I don't know exactly what it is they're doing over there, but they're clearly doing something right because it's working.
Right.
So that's something when I was asked, I'm like, absolutely, I want to get involved in this and be a part of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm doing these days, I guess, with that. I think that's most of my volunteer time. I don't know. There's a lot of other little things like here and there. Like, I mean, I just dropped cookies off this morning for, so Christ the King Church is hosting Totus Tuus, which is like the summer camp for kids. It's this week-long thing. And they have volunteers who bake cookies all the time. And I got like a call earlier this week and they're like, hey, Megan, can you still bake cookies for Wednesday? And I'm like, sure, completely forgot that was happening. But yeah, absolutely. So
in like blazing summer heat too, by the way.
Yeah, I know, and my house doesn't have air conditioning either. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to wait until like 10:30 at night to start baking. Which, you know, it's late, but it's cool enough at that point. I'm like, I don't feel guilty turning my oven on, but yeah,
but it's still, I'm sure, was hot.
it was a little warm, but it's good. Chocolate chip cookies don't take that long to bake, though. So
no, and they're delicious. So there's a payoff.
I've never met a person that's mad about a chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure the kids appreciated it too.
Hopefully they're gone by this point too. Because otherwise, I think some of the staff over there are going to be like, okay, why do we have so many cookies?
Why do we have so many cookies?
Yeah, you know.
Oh my gosh. So. Right, I mean, you also are a musician.
Yes.
Talk to me about how you started to play the cello.
Oh my goodness, that's going back a ways. So I started playing cello when I was in 4th grade in elementary school. School I went to had a music program that started around then.
Did you choose that, or was it?
No. So I chose the instrument, but it's interesting how it happened. So in like towards the end of 3rd grade, the middle schoolers in that school program would come over to the elementary school and do a little concert for all the kids. And at the end, there was an opportunity you could go around and like test out the different instruments. And I had never seen like an orchestra play before in my life. I like more or less knew what a violin was, but like not really. Like kind of knew it existed there.
Yeah.
My mother plays piano, so like I grew up with a piano in the house that I
Okay.
never learned to play except for like chopsticks, which I'm not sure that counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So I went around and I was testing the instruments out and like checking them out and stuff. There was something about the cello and the sounds it was making that just sounded so beautiful, like kind of sorrowful in a way, but just so deep and beautiful. And I just became sort of enamored with this instrument and the sounds it could produce. So that's what I decided to do then. I, went home, told my mom all about it, and I'm like, I want to play the cello. And she's like, okay, whatever, kids, school music program, sure, we can rent the instrument, like, it'll be fine. So that's kind of how that started. And then trying to find a teacher for me at the time was like a little difficult. There weren't too many cello teachers around then. As you know, like people volunteer and don't volunteer or do this at various times. So sometimes there's a list a mile long to provide students, and sometimes it's like, 3 names.
Right.
But my mother, bless her, decided to go forward with one of the more professional people on the list, who is actually a professor at a college, now a university, about half an hour away from our house.
Wow.
So I studied under her from 5th grade all the way until like my junior year of high school.
Wow.
So it was absolutely fantastic. I have to say I had like the absolute like best training and the best teacher.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Anderson, she's absolutely fabulous. Still keep in touch with her on Facebook now, which is great.
That's nice.
But yeah, so that's kind of how that went. Played all through high school. Joined the Canton Youth Symphony when I was in 8th grade. And then I don't know, I did a couple different things. I remember my sophomore year of high school was crazy. I was in 4 different orchestras all at once. One of which was the pit orchestra for the school musical.
Oh boy.
Which is a blast. It was absolutely a blast. But
That's a lot of work.
It was a lot.
That's a lot of rehearsal. It's a lot of time.
It is. And I think part of that, like
in high school.
Yeah, and I'm being so burned out. I think after a while from being in so many of these groups, I didn't really pursue it in college. Part of that I think is, we're always more critical of ourselves than
For sure.
anyone else is going to be. So I didn't join the orchestra in college, focused on sort of my other love, which was English literature, which was great. But I never totally got rid of it. Always, practiced here and there, kept up with little things. And then, after law school and, entering adult life, and I'm like, okay, I don't have like built-in like activities with school anymore. I actually have to go and find something to do.
Yes.
And, I had mentioned to, well, I guess because it started down actually, we go to church down at St. Patrick's in Wallingford a lot, and the music director there had heard my husband and I singing at church one day, and she's just like, we need more people in the choir. And we're like, okay, we don't know that we're great singers, but sure, we'll join. And she's like, it's okay, it doesn't really matter, more people the merrier. And then as we got to talking, I told her about growing up and playing the cello, and she's like, well, would you like to do a special music piece during Easter? And I was like, okay. I was like freaking out because I hadn't like played in public, I think at that point in like over a decade.
Nerves.
Yeah, nerves a little bit. But I'm like, it's fine. It's a small little church. It'll be perfectly fine.
It'll be fine.
Like, totally fine. But I really enjoyed doing that so well that I started joining them regularly and doing music regularly on Sundays with them. So, and it was kind of an interesting but eclectic group. So we had the music director who was a guitarist, and so we had like, on any given Sunday, it's like between like 3 and 4 guitars and a cello and just like a handful of singers. And I'm like, it's very odd, but we made it all work, and it was fun.
Kind of organic,
right? Yeah, it was really lovely. And then once I started doing the town clerk gig in Shrewsbury, one of the residents got talking to her. She also plays cello. There's a lot of musical people in Shrewsbury. Seems to be a little like hub for them. Yeah. And she mentioned, well, have you ever thought about joining the Champlain Philharmonic? And I'm like, oh, you mean there's like an actual like local like community orchestra? And well, sort of. They meet up in Vergennes for rehearsals. So sort of local.
Right. Well, in Vermont, I think anywhere in Vermont is local.
Yes,
right?
that's usually what it comes
Yeah.
down to.
Yeah.
You know, and while it would be great to be able to play with, like, you know, a group that's a little closer, it was, you know, she invited me up to play, and she's like, well, check it out for a rehearsal or two, and you'll find out pretty quickly whether you can, like, play the music or not that they play.
Yeah.
And it's great. They do a lot of, it's somewhat more complicated stuff, but it's stuff that I was playing with the youth orchestra in high school. So it was, you know, fairly similar style and, like, you know, difficulty level. So I was able to pick that up really, you know, fairly quickly.
Nice.
So I kept doing that. And of course, you know, you and I have done things
occasionally,
which is always a blast. So
I agree. It's been fun when we have had the opportunity to work together like that. So to find more of those opportunities to do that.
Yes.
So it's great that, you know, I think it's nice when people have that musical outlet in their life and that they maintain it, and that even after 10 years of not playing, not touching your instrument, you know, you still are connected with it and have kind of come back to it in a different way than you had before. And I think that that's nice. It's something that, you know, as we get older, we can always keep music with us. You know?
It's a skill that never really kind of goes away, and it's never too late to pick it up either. There's like some people that are like,
I agree.
I'm too old to do this or that. And I'm like, no, you're never too old. You know, my father-in-law picked up the bagpipes in his 50s.
There you go.
He's at bagpipe camp this week too. So I'm just like, okay, have fun. Like, completely different, but it, you know, it's one of those things. It can be fun. It's a good creative outlet just to get people out and involved in doing things that feed the soul.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I say this every single time, but we are running out of time. I can't believe that a half an hour has
that goes fast.
Gone by so quickly. So we have a couple minutes remaining. So I want to ask you what I ask most of my guests. I think I've asked everybody so far. What is it that you love about living in the Rutland area? What is it that you love about being part of this Rutland area community?
That's always hard to like pin down kind of one thing, which is kind of funny. So
there's lots of things.
I'm going to preface this with when I came for law school, you know, part of my drive from Ohio would always take me through Rutland on the way over. And every time I drove through, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to live in Rutland. It reminds me too much of home.
Oh.
But of course, ironically, this is where I end up in some ways. But I think I love it almost because of that, because there's something about Rutland, you know, not just the city and the town, but the whole county and the community that very much feels like home to me. And I think a lot of it is the people too. People always make community.
Absolutely.
You know, sometimes it's messy and people get mad at each other, but like at the end of the day, I feel like everybody really cares and wants the community to do well, and they care about each other. Like a tragedy happens and they all come together, and I absolutely love that about this community. That's like probably my favorite thing about it. So
that's a really nice sentiment that, you know, and I imagine, right, just out of college and coming to law school, you're like, I don't want to be in a place that reminds me of home, right? Because it's just that kind of like, no, I don't want that.
I'm like, I left my home state for a reason. I need to get
the rebel aspect, right, of youth. But to hear you say how much you appreciate that now about this area, and that is a comfort, and that it's the people here and the love that they show for their community and for one another that makes you feel like it reminds you of home. That's a beautiful thing, and I share the same sentiment. So thank you so much for coming on today and sharing a little bit of yourself with me and with our viewers. And it's really been lovely to talk with you, Megan. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was delightful. So.
Glad to hear it. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Tea and Talk.